And to conclude, Minister of Economic Planning and Sustainable Development, Honorable Camillo Gonsalves, attended an open day at the Richmond Vale Academy on Saturday, April 15th to mark Earth Day, which will be celebrated on April 22nd. Louis. Finally, on our program, Minister of Economic Planning and Sustainable Development, Honorable Camillo Gonsalves, attended an open day at the Richmond Vale Academy on Saturday, April 15th, 2017. The open day formed part of activities hosted by the institution to mark Earth Day, which will be celebrated on April 22nd, 2017. Minister Gonsalves was one of the two presenters at the one-day activity. He spoke on the topic of sustainable development within the Vincentian context. Minister Gonsalves is recognized for his passion on this matter and also highlighted in his presentation that sustainable development is very important to this country at this time.
We're in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I could say that we're in a country that has invested heavily in renewable energy. We are going to have, in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to move from 20% renewables, 80% fossil fuels, to 80% renewables, well, close to. So we're going to flip the equation, essentially, when we have geothermal energy come on stream and additional investments in solar energy in the Grenadines and improvement to hydroelectricity. So I could say we know about sustainable development. We have renewable energy. I could say we have a zero hunger trust fund and a disaster fund that we've just put in place to help reduce people who are vulnerable in food insecurity and to help our country adapt better and respond better to disasters. I could say we're changing the laws, we're raising the minimum wage, we're putting in occupational health and safety laws, and all of the things that sustainable development encompasses. We are involved. But you could also then respond to me and say that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is still engaged by and large in serious monocrop. We're moving away from bananas, but if you look up the hill, you'll see that there's a new monocrop that's being cultivated. And you could say that a lot of our agriculture, a lot of our infrastructure, a lot of our development practices are not yet sustainable development practices. You could say that we don't recycle enough. You could say that in other aspects, getting out of the climate change space, in other aspects of societal development, there's still too much inequality in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And you would be correct to say all of those things. But what that says is that we are on a path, a sustainable development path, and we are embarking on a journey. And I would like to tell you a little bit about where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going before we can answer some questions. And I think I should start by giving a bit of a history of this, how this sustainable development agenda came to find its way to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So development is the goal of everyone. If you ask any politician anywhere around the world, they say, well, I'm for development. And if you ask any parent, they'll say, I'm for development. But development has had very different definitions over time. Everybody wants to say that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. And development has meant, over the years, a very straight line progression from traditional activities to a mass consumerist, exploitative type of activity in your country or in your space. So when someone says, well, what's development? They say, oh, skyscrapers, that's development. And Walmart is development. And big hotels is development. And to get to that definition of development, there have been a number of prescriptions that have been imposed on countries like ours. To say, well, you are here now, you are in this place called undeveloped, and you want to get to this place called developed. And many of the students of Richmond Vale Academy are from developed countries, and you have markers, and you probably have something in your mind when you think about what is a developed country. And the prescriptions for development have been imposed on us once you accept that definition. So what do you want to do? You want to develop? Okay, that means you want to be like Germany, for example. And if you want to be like Germany, you have to do these things. And it doesn't matter to those making the prescription that you're coming from a different place, you're coming from a different culture, you have different assets, different resources, different liabilities. If you want to get there, there is one path, and we're going to tell you how to do it. And the way that you would do it, there are a number of names for it. There was Washington Consensus, there are IMF structural adjustment programs. But essentially, development meant economic growth. If you wanted to develop, it means that your economy had to grow by 5%, 6%, 7% every year. And if you are doing that, you are developing. So China is developing, and India is developing because their economies are growing at a very healthy rate. And for decades, that's what development meant. Economic growth, or maybe industrialization. Bring industries in to your country. Let us manufacture whatever. Sneakers, tennis rackets, computers, whatever the thing is. Let us build things. Industrialization is development. Economic growth is development. And this is how you get there. But in the mid-80s, which is still before many of you were born, things began to change in what constituted development. Because after applying these prescriptions and these recipes throughout the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, people noticed that countries weren't developing. The poor countries were still poor. The rich countries were still rich. But we've been applying these prescriptions and these definitions and these goals for years and years. What's wrong? What has development wrought in these countries? And what it wrought, of course there were advances. Things changed. But what you got was huge amounts of inequality. So you got very, very rich people and very, very poor people. You got a lot of exploitation of natural resources. So you want to develop? Good for you. You have lumber. Let's cut all your trees down and sell them to somebody else. And that's how you'll develop. But after cutting all the trees down, you still weren't developed. Oh, you have iron ore. Let's dig it all up out of the soil and sell it, and you'll be developed. But it didn't work out that way. And so after seeing the inequality increase, seeing the environment be destroyed, and seeing the the schisms in societies. People said, well, if this is development, we don't want it. We have to redefine what development is. Because before, as I said, it was just economic growth and something that they have called per capita GDP. And per capita GDP basically means let's take all the money that the country is making and divide it by the number of people who live in the country. And if that's a big number, it means things are going well. But in a world of inequality, it doesn't work like that. If Bill Gates suddenly walked into this room and sat down, everybody's per capita GDP would rise because the average money made in the room would be a lot higher. But all of you who are broke would still be broke because Bill Gates wouldn't be sharing his money with you. It would just be that on average, everybody's doing better. And that's what happened with development. Some people got rich. So the numbers would suggest that things were getting better. But when you were on the ground, you noticed the poverty, the inequality, the destruction of the environment, the fact that natural resources were vanishing. And you also noticed that because everybody was following the same prescription, there were global problems. And one of those global problems was climate change. Because if everybody is doing industrialization, and if everybody is building factories, and if everybody is defining success as having 2 SUVs in their garage, then there are global problems that affect everyone. And unfairly enough, the countries that were least developed, by any measure, were the ones most affected by the economic inequality, by the social unrest, and by climate change. The issue of sustainable development, particularly in a small island developing state like ours, is not simply inward-looking. It's not simply what can we do here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because a lot of what is affecting our development opportunities comes from outside of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They're external factors that affect our ability to develop. There are now increasingly storms and hurricanes that hit St. Vincent and the Grenadines that set us back years every time they hit. Stina was talking about how it took her, this morning she was talking how it took years for Richmond Vale Academy to grow bananas, to get it right. And then in one hurricane event, they were all gone. They were all gone. We have lost 10, 12, 15% of our gross domestic product in St. Vincent and the Grenadines every time we get hit by one of these storms. Now, think of a country that's growing at 1 or 2% a year, but being hit by a storm and losing 10% a year. And it tells you that you're walking up the down escalator when it comes to climate change. And we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines aren't causing climate change. Yes, there are things we can do better, but we're not the ones causing it. That's coming from outside.
This is where we conclude this edition of the API's presentation. If you have missed any of our past programs and/or need clarification on anything that is shown on the API's presentations, please like our Facebook page at API, all caps, dash, the Agency for Public Information, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. From the director and staff of the Agency for Public Information, thank you for viewing this evening's presentation. Good evening. I am Keisha Woodley.